Good morning, everybody. Give it a second here so I can go into our group. You can find us on Braveheart Conversations.
There we go.
All right.
Last time it wouldn't let us.
There we go. All right. Yay, we're good. Okay, so this morning we are here with you today with Braveheart Conversations. I am Jillian Aurora and my co-host is Marie Wallace.
Hi, guys.
And today we're going to be talking about rebuilding trust. I just want to thank you wherever you are joining us from, whether you're here every week on Facebook Lives or you find us on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, wherever you are listening. Thank you so much. All right, so today, rebuilding trust. This was a request that we had. So last week we talked about not compromising our values, and so I really think this is a great follow-up because the question that I get a lot is, well, you're such a hard ass about all these boundaries. Do you even believe in relationships working out? I don't know if you get this one as well.
Oh, I do, actually.
This is a really common question I get. Because we live in this illusion that says if you have boundaries and standards, you will be alone, right? It's unrealistic. And so you must compromise and you must put up with some bullshit in order to have relationships in your life. And I have found that to be a huge myth that we've bought into. And so what is important to know, right, is when to forgive and rebuild trust and when to not, when to give up and to say there's no more hope in this and I'm going to let it end. I'm going to let it die because it's wanting to die, right? So knowing when that time is tricky. And of course there are times to forgive and to decide we're going to rebuild trust, right? I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. Nobody's perfect.
I am sometimes. No.
So, of course, there are times where it's appropriate. You know, I really appreciate when someone gives me grace, right? And someone says, hey, you know, this is not really honoring. And then I get the chance to correct it, right?
Yeah. So
there gets to be some of that. So this is a really common question that comes up. So I'm really glad that it was pitched last week. So, when to rebuild trust. So the elements of trust are really important. We've talked about braving before, which that's my favorite, Anatomy
Brené
of
Brown,
Trust
yes.
by Brené Brown, and I use it very frequently. So one thing I really advocate for is relationship check-ins, not when something has happened, but before something has happened. I really, really believe in having relationship check-ins regularly. So if it's once a week, every other week, once a month, whatever works for you, but having a regular time when it's not based in a problem, but it's just a check-in, and they're trust check-ins or braving check-ins. And so really quickly, I'll just run through that.
Sure.
Acronym. So braving stands for B, which is boundaries. So we both can say what we want and what we need, and we are both acknowledged and heard. R is reliability. So I say, whatever I say I'm going to do, I do. I follow through. A is accountability. So it means I make amends. I am accountable for the wrongs that I've done. I will admit readily and I will make amends. V is vault. And that's just saying I'm going to keep in confidence what you've shared in confidence with me. And this not only goes for your partner, but if you're gossiping to your partner about other people that have shared in confidence with you, this is also eroding trust. So vault is really important. I is integrity. It means I choose to do the right thing over what is fun, fast, or easy.
Yes.
So when I see my partner doing that, that also builds trust. N is non-judgment. So non-judgment means that there's no judgment if I need help or you need help. And then G is one of my favorites, which is generous assumptions. that we assume the best of each other. So if there's something in question, our go-to gets to be, oh, I bet they just,
Yes.
forgot, or it's not an immediate faulting them for something. So that's
Just
the
believing the best in people.
believing the best, yeah, and believing the best of your partner. That goes a really long way.
Exactly.
Now, what I'm not saying in generous assumptions is if there has been a long pattern of mistreatment.
Yes.
Sometimes we're really quick to give hope where it really is not deserved. So anyway, that's the rundown of braving. I very much advocate for braving check-ins and building that trust on a regular basis.
It also helps with communication, having those regular check-ins. You're seeking understanding of your partner, so it does over time that check-in helps you build the trust, but it also is helpful for misunderstandings. So you just get that regular time with each other. That's very important.
Very, very important. Yeah, so I really believe in check-ins that are not based in, that's not rebuilding trust. That's
No.
just building trust, period, all
Right.
the time, right? If we're focused on rebuilding, then we're
That's
really,
what I meant was building, yes.
yeah, we're really focused on reaction and damage control instead of really building a foundation. So I do want to talk a little bit about
It
that.
makes difficult conversations easier, too.
So much easier. If you already have a foundation of understanding, that's going to go a lot smoother for you. So braving is huge. I also want... Yeah, hi guys. Thank you so much for being here with us. Okay, so rebuilding, when not to rebuild trust and when to do that. So I just finished a book. It was phenomenal, called Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud. And he's the same person that wrote Boundaries. So really, really great author. And one thing he talked about that really struck me was the usefulness of hopelessness. And I had never really thought about it that way.
That is an interesting thought.
That, I have always perceived hopelessness as a bad thing.
It sort of pushes you to make a choice.
Sometimes it's good to get hopeless. So one of the examples that he used was Samsung was pitched an offer to go digital with their phone service. And they didn't want to do that because they were already a successful company and they already had a good reputation. They were solid. Well, because they didn't get hopeless about the previous, your old flip phone, they didn't get hopeless about that, the direction of that, and the profitability of that product. They didn't give up on that, so then therefore they were left in the dust, and other companies did take the digital idea, and now, we all use smartphones. So that's one example of getting hopeless. So not getting hopeless blocks you from bringing in the other new things, new people, new relationships, new
possibilities.
Jobs. Yeah. So if we get too stuck in having hope for things where we really could benefit from being hopeless, it can really damage us.
Hold us back and not allow us to grow.
Right. Right. So when we talk about rebuilding trust and hope really go together. So when we give someone the opportunity to rebuild hope, when we give them the opportunity to rebuild trust, we are saying we have hope in that relationship. Does that make sense?
It sure does.
Yeah. So some of the things that are important to acknowledge is my experience with rebuilding trust was you just need to forgive and forget, and we'll just move forward and forget about the past. So in that particular arena, what I was being asked to do was to shoulder the entire burden of rebuilding trust. It was solely on me to just forgive and forget, and let's just move forward. In true rebuilding...
And you're also taking all the responsibility, and the other person hasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So in true trust building, the recipe, what's important is that you have both people interested and invested in rebuilding that trust. So there is forgiveness on one part and saying, yes, we're going to try again, and I'm willing to put the past behind me. And then the other person is also invested. They're invested in saying, I know I did something wrong. Here are the action steps that I'm taking and my commitments that I'm taking to do something different. And then their actions follow that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have all of those ingredients, then it is time to give up trust. If you're the only one responsible and expected to just forgive and forget, that is not trust building.
Nope.
And I remember it used to really, I used to feel so sad when my partner would say, well, you just need to trust me more, or you just need to stop fearing me, or I don't want to be someone
well, then we feel we're bad people for not trusting them or not letting it go.
Yes, and trust isn't something that you can just force yourself to have. So this is a big distinction for me. Love is unconditional, but trust is earned. So trust gets to be built. It's not something that I can just flip a switch and say, yeah, I trust you, because intuitively we already are built. We already know not to do that.
Sure.
We are built to keep track of patterns and to see intuitively when something is dangerous.
It's a warning.
It's a warning. So it's not something that we want to shut off. It's something that we get to listen to. And it doesn't mean that we don't rebuild trust. It means we get to acknowledge if there's actually probability of change. Mm-hmm. Is there actually action behind the words that are being said, the commitments that are being said? So what's your experience with rebuilding trust? Do you feel like that's been difficult to know? When should I offer another chance? When should I know to rebuild? Or
well, I think early on it was a little difficult because we're going back to that good girl syndrome, and I would feel bad about it. However, there's a part in me that owns that. I have seen this pattern. What is the likelihood? Especially with someone who has an addiction problem, you get to see that pattern over and over again, and you're going, you know what? Nothing's changing here. Mm-hmm. And as difficult as it is to say goodbye, you know that in the end, that's the most loving, kind thing that you could do for either of you. You just know that there's not I think hopelessness is part of it, but I also think you recognize it, like you said, it's built inside. So we recognize when it's appropriate that the response that we're receiving or the boundary that we've created, there's no action behind it. You just have to let it go. And it hurts and it's difficult, but it's also that indicator that nothing's changing. So if you don't see a pattern actually changing, and we're also honoring them by asking them to honor their word.
Yeah.
And they may. So one of the things that one of our friends, our mutual friends, Misty talks about is some people don't have the will or the skill to honor those steps that we are asking them to create, so they may be able to, but it's possible that they don't have the will or the skill to be able to grant that action step, that we're asking them to give.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I see women struggle with a lot is that they think because someone isn't capable, then they should just relinquish.
Try harder.
Well, they just relinquish their standards. They just lower their standards because they're like, well, this person can't meet my standards, so I'm just gonna
lower them.
Yeah, and I really want women to hear this, that you're not obligated to lower your standards just because someone can't meet them. It's okay if people can't meet your standards. It just isn't a fit for you. It's not that they're bad. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's just acknowledging the reality that this person isn't capable of meeting these standards, and I still deserve these standards. I still deserve to be treated with respect. I still deserve to be treated like I have my basic human rights. So even if someone is struggling with, addiction or alcoholism, those are really common things that end up rendering people incapable of offering basic human respect and dignity. And you're not obligated to put up with that just because that's where they're at. So
honestly, that's something that they're struggling with, respect and dignity for themselves.
It is.
And so it's very difficult for them to give it to you when they aren't able to honor that request for themselves.
Their capacity to love you is directly linked to their capacity to love themselves. They can't love you more than they love themselves. So if you're seeing them destroying themselves, just know that's their capacity. They're not able to love you any better than that, which is hard news to hear, but it's really true. All right. I had a thought and it just left me.
So that's the side of when not to. How about when to? When it's okay to start rebuilding trust.
Yeah, okay, so this brings me back to that hopelessness recipe. Like when to have hope, when not to have hope. And this was a really easy assessment to make. So there's two things that are involved in hope. One is the desire or the wish for something to change. And then the second one is the means, the probability that it's going to happen. So very often we continue having hope only based on one. I have a desire for this to change, so I'm just going to keep hoping and hoping and hoping. But is there action behind it? So this is really key, and it gives us some very objective ways to see, is hope a good option here? So I like to think of a credit score in this way. So if you apply for a loan, they don't say, well, I know that you desire to pay me back.
Yeah, they're looking at results, man.
They look at your credit score. They look at your history, and they say, okay, you have a pattern of not paying your bills. You're a risk. I'm not going to trust you. So they're basing that hope and that trust on what your behavior has been, not on what your wish is, because you could be so genuine. I really want to pay you back and I'm fully committed. Well, what have you done with your past commitments? That's a really, really big indicator about whether you're going to follow through with your future commitments. Now, is that a forever done deal? No. In 6 months, if you apply to the same lender and you've improved your credit score, they have no issue giving you a loan. So we get to look at hope in the same way. What has your track record been? And if you truly are committed to change, what are you doing differently? If you have a really shitty credit score, what are you going to do differently? Are you just going to try harder? Because that's probably not going to work. Probably need to, you're going to get some skills, right? You're going to maybe take a course.
Maybe need a third party to come in and intervene.
Maybe you'll get a financial advisor. Maybe you will read a bunch of books. Maybe you'll do the things needed to get yourself out of the rut that you're in. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So when I see, a lot of the women I work with struggle with partners with addiction. Well, they can be so genuine. I'm gonna change. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna all the things. The proof is in the pudding. What are they doing? So when I see someone, because I have seen addicts and alcoholics really, really interested in change, and you know what I see? I see them, going to meetings every day and getting a sponsor and always on the phone with their sponsor, or getting into counseling or reading books about addiction, or getting into courses, or having mentors, people that they can rely on. They're changing their friends. They're changing their environment. They are serious. And they don't need somebody else to tell them to do that. They do it themselves. They are invested. So that's a huge key. What do you see them doing? What are the action steps that are changing? And how invested are they in making the changes? So very often what I see is the women I work with are the driving force.
Yeah, I want to address the other side too. Examine your reasons for keeping that relationship around, because a lot of times what we're doing is we're compromising this also goes back to what we talked about last time. We're compromising because our value of wanting someone warm next to us, it supersedes, and we're willing to compromise or hope things get better because we're worried about the security of having someone with us. So we have to examine our own motivations too. Why am I offering this person another chance? Is it because I truly see results? And you know, in this case, I'm the lender. I'm the credit person. Am I offering this loan because I want to be a nice person? Or is it because I'm actually seeing results in this person and they are doing all the steps necessary to change the outcome? And if they're not, I have to really examine my motivations for lending this hope out again, anyway, I know I've been there and I've seen that, and it doesn't matter how much that other person wants to be there. If the results are the same, you're just causing yourself more heartache. Back to the will or the skill, they may not have the skill, but if you're seeing that, let's talk about addiction, because I've been in several relationships where they go, I really want to make this work. Well, when you show up at my house at 3:00 in the morning and you're wasted, well, that may not be an indicator. Or you're not going to the meetings, or whatever it is that you're honoring yourself that you say you will do. Will there be moments where you're not perfect? Yes, we get that and we understand that. But again, what are the steps you're actually taking and making?
Yes.
So just honoring yourself when you're the person offering the hope out, honoring yourself and really taking an honest look at why. Because sometimes we are not honest with ourselves about our reasons for keeping that person in our life.
Yeah. And I really, I think this goes back to that myth. We so believe, like, the biggest fears that I see come up is if I have boundaries, I'm going to be alone.
Oh yeah, you're right back to the beginning.
And you might have a period of being alone because you may lose the relationships around you that don't honor your boundaries. But you will never be able to invite the people that do honor your boundaries into your space until you've cleared that space of the people who don't. So I can tell you only my personal experience, which is that I have held really strong boundaries, more and more and more strong boundaries, because I do see the results, that I do let go of some people, but the people that I invite in after are like the level that they operate at is so much different, and I get to have like full respect, full love and appreciation all the time, because that is what I am available for. That's the only thing I'm available in my space anymore. I'm not available for any relationships that dishonor me and disrespect me, dismiss my feelings, demean me. That is just not there.
Once you've had it, you can't go back.
You can't unknow what you know.
You can't unknow it. Once you've felt that relationship with anyone where there's honor and respect, and you just can't accept it anywhere else. It's just it's a done deal.
It is. So let that be an encouragement to anyone who is fearing that if I have boundaries, then I'm going to be alone. It's the biggest lie that I ever bought into. And I'm really grateful that I was willing to take the leap and to say, no, I'm going to go ahead and have these standards. And some people say, well, how dare you? You can't expect perfection. I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting basic respect. And what I feel like many women especially have done is, for so long in history, we have had to deal with disrespect. And we haven't had the freedom to release people that didn't hold that level of honor for us. And so it's like a very foreign idea now to say, well, I can have that and actually operate in that freedom. So it's not about not being willing to forgive and accept amends and rebuild trust. That's totally like, yes, do those things. But if you don't see the behavior lining up and action behind that, you're free to let those people go. You don't have to keep trying and putting yourself in a miserable situation over and over. And you're not going to be alone. Like, there's a lot of people who are willing to offer you respect. And a big thing that helped me with that is knowing, I offer people respect. I don't belittle people and demean people. And that's not a stretch for me. That's not a hard thing for me. So to then realize and acknowledge that there's other people out there like me that just hold that basic level of dignity and respect, it's actually not that hard to think.
Well, I also want to talk about families.
Yeah, do it.
Because families, sometimes we think we give them an overextending grace sometimes because they're our family. And I've seen that many times with people that I work with that's my mom, or that's my brother, or that, and they give them this grace of dishonor, right? And it's just such an unhealthy relationship. So just because they're family, now I have a wonderful family and I feel really good about that. All I'm saying is that they will come around, and if they don't, so just backing up just a little bit because I kind of went ahead of myself. If you find that they are dishonoring to you, it is okay to set a boundary. It doesn't mean anything except that maybe I won't engage with you as much, or maybe it doesn't, like you said early on, it's still unconditional love. I still love you and appreciate you and honor you, but in this space, this is what I allow. And very easily, and I've had it happen in my own life where I've had to let some people go, and they came back in my space because then they understood to be in this space. And a lot of times you say it feels like you're being snotty, and you're not. You're just, you're happy. You feel and experience this level of happiness because you've only allowed this kind of respect and honor in your space, and you're just not tolerating. I think that's what we get to. We get complacent or tolerant, or that unending grace. Well, it's not really grace. It's more, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. We think it's grace because we've been told to give grace and forgiveness to our families especially. And I'm not saying anything bad about anyone's family. I'm just saying sometimes we overextend.
It's
Exceptions. We have exceptions. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've seen that a lot. Because they're my child, because they're my mom, because they're my spouse, like then they have this exception to having to respect me, which it's like, no, like they're the most people, they should have the most
space most often.
Yeah, no. And then, a lot of people also think, well, boundaries means just cutting people out of your life. It's very black and white.
No.
That's not the case at all. So if you do decide your trust has been broken over and over, and there hasn't been reparations made, and there isn't investment in change, then you do get to adapt that relationship. I like the quote, you can either adapt your boundaries to someone's disrespect, or you can adapt your relationship to your boundaries, right? You get to choose, and I choose to adapt my relationships to my boundaries because I get to have respect. That's just a basic right that I have. And so that doesn't mean giving them up. It means adapting the relationship. So that means, maybe I choose, they aren't allowed in my home because they violated me multiple times in my home. Or maybe I choose not to hang out with them alone because that ends up being treacherous territory. Or, maybe I choose to only have telephone conversations with them, or I always have a third party present, or I only email. Like, there's so many different ways.
It's so much room on the scale, and you get to decide, how much contact or how much availability.
And there's so much freedom in saying, oh, I can say no to going to that family reunion. Oh, I can say no to having them in my home. Yes. You have the right to deny access to anyone who wants to be in your space. That's the only thing you're entitled to is you. So you get to determine how people access you. That's what boundaries are all about. How do you, what are the requirements to access me? my time, my effort, my
resources.
Yeah, my resources, my body, my presence. Like, what is it? What are my requirements? What are my standards to access me? There's very few things in this world that you're entitled to, and yourself is definitely what you are entitled to. Very often we get it crossed, right? We think we're entitled to somebody else and their time and resources and whatever, but we forget that we're entitled to us, and that's it. So yeah, you get to determine, like, how many times has that trust been broken, and is there action behind their words? If they're telling you they want to rebuild trust, are they doing the things? Are they picking up the book? Are they going to counseling? And who is driving that change?
Yeah.
Are you the one that's saying, hey, did you go to counseling? Hey, did you...
Checking up on...
You know, that change is driven by you. It's not driven by them. So when I look back on my life, I've been hungry for change. I've always been a seeker, right? I've always had mentors. I've always had coaches. I've always read books. I've always been in courses, like hungry, 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 right? I love it. That's motivated by me. Nobody had to tell me, oh man, you really should be reading that, or you really should be, nobody's having to push me to do it. That's a big indicator. So if your partner or person that you're trying to rebuild trust with is not hungry and not taking the steps, you're spinning your wheels and you're giving a lot of energy to someone who is really not in the place to receive that. If they aren't hungry for it, like, everything else will break down. It all must hinge on what our desire is. If my desire is to learn and grow, there's nothing in the world that can stop that. If Marie has a desire to learn and grow,
I do, yeah.
There's nothing that can stop that. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing or not doing. If your partner wants it, they're going to get it. And if you're the one having to do all the driving and change, it's a big red flag. And perhaps this person has not earned your trust.
Perhaps it goes back to the will or skill. They may not have the will or the skill, and that's the indicator, is where are they at, and being really honest with yourself about that.
And this is really not about making them a bad person. Somebody who doesn't take the steps to rebuild trust with you, we're not saying they're a bad person. They can still be a really good person, and it can still be apparent that your paths are different.
Yeah.
And it's okay to release someone and to still say, I love you, and I still respect me enough that I get to see that this is going nowhere. This is going nowhere, and I'm lugging around dead weight, right? I'm lugging around something that is begging to die, to be released. There's seasons, right? We're not in perpetual harvest. We have seasons for harvest and winter when things die, right? And new life. We have those seasons and we get to acknowledge them. So acknowledging an ending, a fall and a winter, is not a bad thing. It's okay. So if someone's behavior is telling you that this relationship is just not going to be an honoring relationship anymore, it's okay to acknowledge that that is an ending, that it's something that is a season, that you get to celebrate what happened in that relationship, and then you get to release it in love, because what honors you also honors everyone else. So,
well, I want to talk a little back to the metaphor of the seasons, because even when let's talk about gardens, right? When you have a garden and you have something sucking all the life out, you cut it back so that it can grow and flourish. And what you might be doing is also allowing them to grow and flourish. Maybe sometimes that relationship doesn't, the reason the season's over for it is because it's not, neither one of you are growing or flourishing in that moment, and it is time for something different or new. But you have to cut back. And even though, like, I know for me, when I'm working in my garden, sometimes it's painful to cut some of those things back, and you're going, oh, I don't want to do this. And it always comes back bigger and brighter, and it grows even more so. And so just using that metaphor, we don't want to leave you hopeless here, because that's not our intention. But there are times when you have to let go and let and see what happens on that. And sometimes your garden really flourishes from letting and honoring those things to go, because then you have more room and space for you to fill up and to grow more. So you've probably reached the end of that particular.
Yeah, I love that. Pruning. I'm a huge gardener.
Yeah.
Pruning is really, really healthy and necessary. Anybody that grows plants knows that, even cutting off sometimes healthy things. Cutting off dead and dying for sure. Cutting off things that are growing in a different direction than you want them to go. Like, that can be really healthy for a plant. One of the books that I read recently was called The Pumpkin Plan, and it's actually a business book. But I loved the analogy because what they talk about is the people that grow the really, really gigantic pumpkins that are like insane. The way that they do that is they cut off all the other pumpkins on the vine, and they only have the one pumpkin.
Then it can really.
Right. So then all of the resources from that vine are going straight to that one pumpkin. And that's such a key lesson, because I know for me, I've often had too many pumpkins on my vine. I try to keep everything alive. And sometimes the best thing to do is release a couple of the small ones that aren't your biggest passion.
They can grow bigger.
and feed all that nourishment into, when you let go of something that's dead and dying, you're pouring life into things that really want the life. They're hungry for life, right? So when you put your hope into what is really wanting to flourish and live, like, that's where I want to put my hope. I don't want to breathe life into something continually that really wants to die.
So it goes back to the word focus. What are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the death or the growing and the living too?
Yeah. So rebuild trust where both people are invested in building trust, and let there be action behind people's words in building that trust. And forgive. Always forgive. It's not a matter of not forgiving.
Forgiving just really is empowering to you.
Yep. It's practicing radical acceptance. This is where they are, and it's okay. And this may or may not work for me still, and that's okay. So that radical acceptance of what is really important. So I don't think I saw any questions.
No. Pretty good conversation again.
Yeah, this was a really great conversation. We always love any of the questions that you give us. In fact, this podcast today was birthed out of a request. So please let me know if you have any topic requests. We'd love to hear them. If you have any questions that come up, like, well, that didn't quite make sense, or if you want to challenge something that we've talked about, please do that.
Or topics you want to explore.
Yep.
We love that.
Or personal challenges. We would love to hear from you. If you have something you'd like to share anonymously, if I can get that word out.
That's a tough word.
Please share any of those thoughts with us. You can reach me privately at defytheaverage@gmail.com or
Marie at mariesgold.com.
And of course, you can also follow us on our Facebook group page, and there you can start discussions or join in on conversations or see any of our past episodes. And you can find that page at facebook.com/groups/braveheartconversations. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. We love you all very much and can't wait to see you next week.
No.
Thank you.
Looking forward to it.
Bye-bye, guys.